What's up everybody, this is Jose from Southern Life. On today's video, we'll be looking at 10 cities in Florida that have a specific crime problem. Now today's video is not the most dangerous cities in Florida or cities that have the most crime in general. We're talking about cities that for some reason or another have one specific type of crime that is very prevalent. Cities that are known for a particular crime. In fact, some of the cities we're going to be talking about can be considered among some of the best places to live in Florida overall. So we're not talking about random crime in general. We're focusing on particular crime categories that some of these cities have a problem with. The most notable crime problems in Florida doesn't exactly mean that that place overall is a bad place. It just means that a particular type of crime is very prevalent in that specific city. So on today's video, I don't want to hear you guys say that this is a city that I live in and it's great here. If your city wasn't known for this crime, we wouldn't be talking about it. So that's very clear and straightforward. We're talking about specific types of crimes that have become notable in particular cities in Florida. Number one is DUIs in the city of Sarasota. Sarasota is easily one of the best places to live in Florida. However, when it comes to DUIs, hit and runs, types of crimes associated with drinking and driving, like leaving the scene of a crash or causing damage to property of a vehicle, Sarasota has a serious problem. On February 10th, this woman had an accident in Sarasota that led to the death of 2 people. And she didn't just cause the accident, she also fled from the scene. The victims, a 5-month-old baby and a 2-year-old baby. The mother was left in critical condition. This is just one of many news stories that we hear in Sarasota, whether it's drinking and driving, fleeing the scene of a crash, or causing property to damage. In the city of Sarasota, almost on a daily basis, somebody is arrested for a DUI. That means that being around the city late at night driving around is absolutely dangerous. And one is always having to deal with people drinking and driving, making the streets of Sarasota late at night a fairly dangerous place, particularly on the weekends. Many people, when they approach intersections, will even slow down despite the fact that they have a green light, because so many people are known to blow red lights. The city of Sarasota has been very proactive in targeting this issue. For example, dangerous intersections have red light cameras that give people a ticket if they blow a red light, something that happens very often, particularly with drunk drivers. Even if they don't cause an accident, perhaps a ticket and a photo of them blowing a red light could be a good reminder to those individuals that the behavior that they do while drinking and driving is dangerous to society. The city of Sarasota also has heavy patrols on roads like Fruitville that are known to be corridors for people drinking and driving from bars back to their residences. But despite the efforts of the Sarasota Police Department to try to crack down this problem, the amount of people that drink and drive in this city every single day is astonishing, and law enforcement can't prevent every person from getting behind the wheel, leading to an onslaught of horrific news stories that we hear all the time in Sarasota. There's even Facebook groups dedicated to posting every single day the horrific accidents that lead to cars flipping over and other horrific scenarios that take place almost on a daily basis in the city of Sarasota, particularly photos of cars flipped over after getting T-boned at intersections is almost a daily occurrence. The amount of cars that I've seen flipped over in Sarasota since I've moved here is mind-boggling. Despite the fact it's a beautiful, great, and safe city, when it comes to DUIs, Sarasota has a huge problem. And again, law enforcement is being proactive in policing these areas and making sure that there's red light cameras and anything they can to stop this problem, but it seems to never really be enough. Number 2 is fraud in Hialeah. Just like Sarasota, there's many great things to be said about Hialeah. For one, it has one of the lowest homicide rates of any city its size. It has over 200,000 people, yet it has a homicide rate that's less than half the national average. Recently, there's been an increase in homelessness like everywhere in Florida, unfortunately, but I've never seen an actual crime take place in Hialeah. It is considered one of the safest cities in Florida. Me and my wife love to go here, and it's always a very safe city, even late at night. However, when it comes to fraud and scamming, Hialeah has a bad reputation. And not only does Hialeah have fraud and scamming, it's so prolific that it actually spreads into other cities in Florida. Many of the real estate frauds that happen in Sarasota, Fort Myers, and all throughout Florida are people who actually originate in Hialeah. In other words, scamming and fraud is so pervasive here that it actually spreads into other parts of Florida. Many times when a car theft ring or any type of theft ring, diesel fuel, credit card fraud, real estate fraud, any type of scheming to defraud, a lot of times when they catch the people behind it, they're residents of Hialeah. Hialeah also has endemically the problem that it's one of the poorest cities in Florida. Despite that, being in Miami-Dade County, it has some of the highest cost of living. Thus, it's a very difficult place to make a living. Overwhelmingly, Hialeah is 96% Hispanic, and that creates some very good analytics like safety. But when it comes to freaking scamming and fraud, the situation in Hialeah is absolutely out of control. Over the years, there's been many different ways that this problem has manifested itself. Recently, real estate fraud has been a huge problem where people rent properties that they don't own, whether it's in Lehigh Acres, Cape Coral, or Sarasota. It seems that the persons behind the crimes always originate in Hialeah. A while back, credit card fraud was a huge thing, and it continues to be a problem. Many times, these credit card fraud rings originate in Hialeah. Recently, there's been a wave of heavy equipment theft and any other large thefts. We're talking anything from work equipment all the way to heavy work trucks like semis and dump trucks. These rings almost always originate in Hialeah. This isn't just a problem endemic to Hialeah. There's a few other cities out west like Phoenix, for example. It seems like the further down you push the homicide rates, the scammier places get. And this is one of the trade-offs of living in very safe, violent crime areas. If you drive down the homicide and the violent crime rate too far down, then you usually get scenarios like Hialeah or Phoenix, Arizona, where overall these are some of the safest places to live. But for some reason, in those places, scheming and fraud becomes prevalent. It seems that when cities in the United States have very low violent crime rates, they'll have other categories of crimes that just shoot right through the ceiling. In the case of Hialeah, you have gangsters that have just got way too smart. They go for crimes that have very high rewards and very low probabilities of detention. Many times these individuals are able to perpetrate these crimes year after year, enriching themselves from their economic frauds. And what's interesting is that they even seem to have a morality about it. Many times the criminals from Hialeah don't commit these frauds in Hialeah, but they travel to other cities to defraud people there, making sure that within their community, scammers and fraudsters aren't looked at as harmful people, which means that in their own territory, they're not pooping where they eat, as we would say. This has led to a situation where in Hialeah, scamming and fraud has become kind of a lifestyle. And it seems like the golden rule for people in Hialeah is don't commit crimes here in our community. You'll see entire waves of crimes happening in other cities perpetrated by people in Hialeah, but they won't commit those same crimes in Hialeah itself. They target other communities. And now you're starting to see people that also panhandle and people that sell fruits on the street corners and all other types of petty scam, but at the end of the day, crime here is very sophisticated. This has given Hialeah a horrible reputation, and many people assume that Hialeah is a very dangerous city. But in reality, Hialeah actually has some of the lowest crime analytics of anywhere in the United States, and most people that are part of criminal networks or crime syndicates as they're known here understand that they're not allowed to commit these crimes in Hialeah. They have to go elsewhere to get that money. Just recently here in Sarasota, we had a string of diesel theft, we had a string of heavy equipment theft, and we had people doing check fraud. All of them were from Hialeah. When I lived in Naples and Fort Myers, Lehigh, and Going Get Estates, the same scenario. All of these scams originate in Hialeah, the city of modern pirates. Number 3 is no valid driver's license in Immokalee. It seems like not a single day goes by in Collier County where somebody isn't arrested in Immokalee for getting behind the wheel listening to corridos without having a valid driver's license. Some estimates put the population of Immokalee at around 90% undocumented people, which means that if we were to have deportations of every illegal, this town would literally disappear off the map. Most people here carpool or ride a bicycle, but some homies just can't resist the urge to get behind the wheel of an F-150. Collier County, Florida is considered one of the safest places to live in the state, but the town of Immokalee overall is very crime-ridden. It has some of the worst poverty analytics of anywhere in the United States, despite the fact it's in one of the richest counties, if that makes any sense. These are the poor people that are exploited by the rich, and the reality of many people here is that they don't have a driver's license. This creates a somewhat dangerous situation where individuals who don't have a driver's license are behind the wheel, and they cause a lot of problems for the community, particularly when these individuals that don't know how to drive get involved in accidents. And overall, Immokalee, Florida is a place where you got to be really careful driving or walking around, since a lot of people behind the wheel don't really have a driver's license. There's even a farm workers village. The Collier County Housing Authority isn't for the homeless and disabled of the county. It's so that these agricultural companies that use illegal migrant work can have a place to store their workers at the expense of taxpayers. That should just give you an idea that the big corporations that are profiting from all this illegal labor are actually in bed with local government, ensuring that even they can be subsidized by the government in their little businesses here, like agriculture, that create some of the most miserable living conditions that exist in the United States. Many times these individuals want a piece of the American dream, and they figure the best way to do it is to get behind the wheel of a car without a driver's license. It's a prolific problem in this community, and the arrests are almost daily. And I guess it doesn't really help that Immokalee is an isolated inland town, which means if you're doing anything serious, you have to take a very long drive to Naples. There's a triangle between Bonita Springs, Immokalee, and Lehigh Acres. And this area here is prolific for law enforcement extorting individuals who don't have a valid driver's license. Now, growing up in Naples, I always heard if you were illegal, you could just keep your title to the vehicle in the glove box, and if law enforcement detained you and pulled you over, you could just trade your title for your freedom. Now, this was mostly a thing with Lee County Sheriff's Office. I believe Collier County just seemed to hire a little bit better quality specimens for their law enforcement teams. But at the end of the day, extorting migrants is a huge problem with law enforcement down there. The city of Fort Myers just recently arrested a police officer who was doing exactly that, purposely pulling over migrants to try to extort them. And while that seemed like a really interesting case, the protocol wasn't exactly the way it actually goes down. It seems like this guy didn't know what the crap he was doing. It seems like the good old boys didn't teach this new young rookie the ropes of the game down there, and well, he just wasn't moving right, or maybe he just wasn't breaking off the right people to learn the right techniques. Whatever the situation, they threw that guy underneath the bus. And then the law enforcement officers would auction off the vehicles that were taken from illegal migrants. So it was a complete freaking racket they've been running for years down there. I don't know if this racket still exists or if they just threw this guy underneath the bus, but whatever the situation, not only are there a lot of people driving without a valid driver's license, but it seems like law enforcement kind of plays into the whole thing fairly well. Number 4 is trespassing in Bradenton. As you guys know, Bradenton has a huge homeless population, and they are constantly getting arrested for trespassing. Development has finally reached Bradenton, which means that many of the empty lots and areas that were sitting vacant for many years are now in demand for the development of new communities. And this has led to the homeless people that were here for many years having practically nowhere to go. If you've ever been to Bradenton, Florida, you may have noticed that there is a huge homeless population here, and the few places that they had to live in the past today are being developed, which means that the homeless population has practically nowhere to go in Bradenton. Many times the homeless end up getting hit by vehicles. Just like Sarasota, there's a huge DUI problem. Just like Immokalee, there's a huge no valid driver's license situation. All that leads to a horrific situation for the homeless population. Don't forget that many times the homeless are also under the influence themselves, which doesn't make it any safer. Driving through Bradenton at night, the homeless population is a huge problem. You have to drive very carefully because the pedestrians are many times not sober, venturing out into the road and getting hit by vehicles. Many times the drivers are drunk, many times the pedestrians themselves are the problem. Regardless, it's a very dangerous situation in Bradenton because of the massive homeless population. The biggest legal hurdle that the homeless face, however, despite the dangers being hit by vehicles and all the other dangers that are surrounding the issue of homelessness, the biggest problem is getting arrested for trespassing, since it seems that there's almost nowhere for the homeless to go. Recently, there's only a few homeless shelters, and they have a very bad reputation with the homeless community. Many years ago, the homeless here in Bradenton had plenty of places to hide in the woods, but now all this development has sprung up and they have nowhere to go. Many of them are being arrested for trespassing. A lot of times the people that are homeless are elderly, disabled. They have nowhere to go. A lot of them are even literally in wheelchairs or having amputations. It's a horrible situation. You guys may have seen a video I recently uploaded in Sarasota where an 83-year-old man was arrested for being homeless. Instead of offering the homeless help, they're just getting arrested. It's a horrendous situation that's going on in Bradenton. Recently, somebody was driving recklessly and crashed their vehicle into the Salvation Army outside where the homeless sleep. I don't remember exactly what it was. I'm pretty sure there was a death right outside of the Salvation Army as a vehicle spun out of control, hitting a crowd of people that were sleeping outside of the Salvation Army. The situation with homelessness and trespassing is huge in Bradenton, and is definitely one of the craziest crime situations that's happening in Florida. Let's not forget all the other crimes that are surrounding this situation. It's a horrible situation here in Bradenton. Let's not forget how bad this problem is. And now that the city of Bradenton has been cracking down on homelessness, it's pushing them further into Sarasota and into Lakewood Ranch. Of course, the more they crack down in one place, it just moves the problem elsewhere. Now, places like Lakewood Ranch that used to not have a homeless problem are starting to have it because law enforcement is pushing the homeless further into the suburbs. Number 5 is theft in Montura Ranch. Now, Montura Ranch is a large grid pattern practically in the middle of the Everglades. It's mostly old retired people. People from Miami will buy their parents like a few acres out here so they can live out in the woods. Unfortunately, Montura Ranch has become a place where people consider go-to for stealing from elderly people. It's a horrendous situation as well. People here are even having to fence in empty lots if you have anything of value on your property. People have even been reported stealing plants from people's yards here. It's just a horrendous situation. Most of the thieves come from Miami. Miami is a metropolitan area of about 5 million people. So Montura Ranch being, in the middle of the Everglades, a lot of people from Miami that go to rural communities to steal end up finding Montura Ranch as a place where they can go to and steal just about everything. We're talking from people's personal pets getting stolen, dogs and cats. We've seen people go and steal fences off of people's properties. We've seen people's horses get stolen. They target horses for horse meat. It's a black market that exists in Florida, $20 a pound for horse meat. Many times these horses are been shot up with all types of medicines, so the meat's not really healthy to eat. It can actually cause cancer if you're eating horse meat, because the chemicals that they use for these horses isn't exactly for human consumption. Despite the fact these are kind of rural communities in the middle of nowhere, you'll see some very strange things out here, mostly people casing out properties, and they'll steal anything they can get their hands on. Vehicles, fences, farming material. The amount of theft in Montura Ranch is alarming. Now, I started a Facebook group for Montura Ranch to help the people here sell animals and other things, and it kind of runs itself. There's a great group of people here in Montura Ranch that do the best they can to help each other and have a community. They got people that are barbers, they sell their own animals. There's like a gas station in one store for like 5,000 people out here, so it's a very self-sufficient community. They're practically in the middle of nowhere. But thieves, predominantly from Miami, have been targeting this area for a while. You'll see most properties have fences, barbed wire, German shepherds, metal bars on the windows, security cameras, and many times people even all of a sudden discover that all these security measures don't make a difference. Crap, like I said, even the fences get stolen out here. People discover their livestock is gone. These crime rings from Miami have been non-stop targeting Montura Ranch, and I would have to figure there has to be somebody in Montura Ranch that is complicit. People here don't know what to do with the crime situation. It seems like anything that you have in Montura Ranch gets stolen, to the point where the residents don't even allow people to drive ATVs. So they used to have about 2,000 acres that the community used to share for riding ATVs, and the community no longer allows people to ride ATVs because there's so much theft, and they believe that people use ATVs to case out property. So one of the few fun things that you could do out here is riding your ATV, and now you can't do that anymore because people are afraid that they're casing out your properties. Driving on the grass here is a no-brainer. If you drive on the grass, you're going to get flat tires. People have turned this area into a literal minefield, trying to keep people from breaking in and stealing from their properties. And if you think this is an exaggeration, you would sadly have to talk to the people that live here, who understand that even their livestock can be stolen. Overwhelmingly, everybody that lives here is Cuban. You got some Brazilians, some Ecuadorians, some Colombians, you got some Brazilians. It's kind of like a nice, diverse group of people, predominantly Cubans, a few rednecks. People here are very hardworking people. Many years ago, I used to have a really nice trailer. I bought it off a guy that had a wheelchair, and this guy, even though he was in a wheelchair, would take engines out of cars in a wheelchair in his backyard. Everybody out here is just really good, hardworking people. The problem that they have is that because of the isolation and proximity to Miami, people are always coming here to steal things. Sometimes isolation just lends itself to criminal activity. And when it comes to Montura Ranch, it's one of the most isolated places in Florida, and it's sadly close to large metropolitan areas, so it's a problem that continues to persist here. It doesn't seem like there's an end to it, which has made what used to be a great community an absolute crime crap hole for the residents. It's almost on a daily basis. People are posting people's vehicles on social media, trying to figure out why these people are driving around. And the sad reality is that most of them are casing out properties. Number 6 is car break-ins in Port LaBelle. Port LaBelle is a rural area kind of on the outskirts of Fort Myers, and then like Port LaBelle is like a suburb of LaBelle, which is a suburb of Fort Myers. So it's like the outskirts of the outskirts, basically, again, putting you right in the Everglades. Now, this area doesn't have the same type of problem as Montura Ranch, where they steal everything. It seems like the problem here is that you have a lot of young kids with absolutely nothing to do, and late at night, they go around breaking into vehicles. There's a lot of isolation and new home construction, plenty of places to hide. With the youth having practically nothing to do, car break-ins has become a huge problem. The residents say that the Henry County Sheriff's Office is doing practically nothing to stop this issue. Many people report 3 to 4 times a year they find their vehicles have been broken into, And many people say that it's just about on a monthly basis. They're seeing kids on their cameras walking around late at night wearing hoodies, doing car break-ins. This problem has been persistent in Port LaBelle. It doesn't seem to go away. There are some schools in the area. Basically, you have a lot of families with kids living in a place that may be affordable for Southwest Florida, but offers practically nothing for young people to do. And it has led to a situation where the young kids find trouble in these remote parts of Southwest Florida. And just like the other communities, if you go on social media, you'll see that in Port LaBelle, almost on a daily basis, it seems somebody's posting up videos, photos of their security cameras capturing something of this nature. The area continues to grow, but it still remains very isolated, and thus the more people you put out there with practically nothing to do, it's a pretty good commute to Fort Myers or Naples from LaBelle, putting it at about an hour to Naples and at least 45 minutes to Fort Myers. This is just complete isolation in the middle of the Florida Everglades. Nothing for the young kids to do, so they go to delinquency. And not only that, I would even suspect many of these kids practically may not even have enough money to eat, since the incomes here are very low. Options for working here practically don't exist. I wouldn't be surprised if many of these kids doing break-ins are doing it out of necessity with no other options, being that families here have extraordinarily low incomes. And overall, Port LaBelle is a nice community. It's affordable, it's beautiful. Most homes out here are new, the yards are big. There's a lot of nice things that can be said about this area. Many of our subscribers actually found out about this place through our YouTube channel, but law enforcement does not have the resources to patrol just a vast area. And a deterrent would be better than catching these kids committing these crimes. That would start with finding things to do for the young people and giving them better opportunities. It seems like this problem is going to persist for a very long time. Number 7 is registered offenders in Daytona Pines. Daytona Pines is outside of Daytona Beach in Volusia County, and this is a community of registered offenders. The number of people here who are registered is terrifying. A lot of them are predators as well. This makes this one of the scariest places to live in Florida. You'll see people post up all types of really nasty signs to their neighbors. You'll see people living in campers, rebel flags, Trump flags, all types of political ideology, lots of gang members as well. Most are going to be some type of Aryan affiliation of some sort. You get the idea. It's the type of place where people are just not living too good. Crime infected, gang infected, and of course the worst criminals of all, the one that not even inmates want to be near, the most pathetic of all criminals, with the charges that even criminals don't respect. This is the situation in Daytona Pines, a large community with a huge registered offender problem. Most houses here have signs like keep out, no trespassing, cameras watching you, rebel flags, and on every other block it seems the ideology goes hand in hand with the crime here. This is one of those places where you definitely don't want to move to, and it seems like one of those communities which its little crime problem doesn't seem to have an end anytime soon after all these people live in this community. So if you move here, it's on you. And you know what's crazy about this community is you don't hear too many people talk about these types of places, but if you go on a registered offender registry like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement has, you'll find out how terrifying these neighborhoods are. Somewhat swept underneath the rug, the type of place that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to admit these places exist in their communities, but let me tell you, they're out there. Daytona Pines is one of those communities in Florida that is plagued with crime, and this is just another place in Florida that you definitely don't want to end up living in. It may be affordable, but you don't want to end up in this community. I'm still wondering what the political ideology correlation is with these registered offender parks, but it always seems to be kind of hand in hand. Where you have one, you have the other. And again, I don't know what the correlation is, but they always seem to go hand in hand with each other. I don't know if these individuals try to use these ideologies to appeal to people, but at the end of the day, these are terrifying communities. Type of place you don't move to, and even if you, it's the only thing you can afford, you're practically better being homeless than in these types of communities. Daytona Beach is a crime-ridden crap hole to begin with, but that Daytona Pines area, stay the crap out of there.
No, I'm seeking companionship. Yeah, connection.
Okay, understood.
Right.
It's not honorable or respectable, but I did get into, but it was, at that time I was young, it was beautiful. I was like, oh, right, I'm special, I can do this. And then, people beat on you. They take all your money. You don't have anything or anybody. You learn to love them. This big man upstairs.
Number 8 is monetary abuse of females in Tampa. I think we kind of all know what this is. The Tampa metropolitan area is plagued with women of the night, and many times it's kind of like a network that spans from the inner city of Tampa into the suburbs. Now you have this problem throughout Florida. It's very common in Miami as well, but I think Tampa is kind of known as the headquarters of trafficking in the United States. It's one of those cities that has a huge trafficking problem. Nebraska corridor is infamous. When law enforcement cracks down on this problem in Tampa, they just move them to hotels in Bradenton or along US 19, maybe hop on over to Lakeland for a little bit into Polk County for a month or two until the heat's off from law enforcement, and they go back to doing it again. Now, this is again a problem plaguing most of Florida's larger cities, but Tampa has the biggest problem. Tampa puts itself out to be a very loving and kind city and welcoming and diverse, but it has a side that's kind of more difficult. For the most part, the situation on the streets of Tampa is that it's very common, very prevalent, and there's even entire districts like Suitcase City, some interstate exits on 75 are just known for this. It's kind of not a secret anymore. Tampa has a problem with human trafficking. I've had the opportunity to interview many women that are in this state, and many of them are just hardcore users that are desperate for anything just so they can have their substances. This makes women particularly vulnerable, and I think a lot of these hustlers know that, and they use that to their advantage to be able to control these women in vulnerable situations. I think Tampa should be able to control this problem. Tampa's also known as the strip club capital of the South, so that doesn't make the situation any better. And again, the tentacles of trafficking expand into Bradenton, Palmetto, Ruskin, Riverview, Wesley Chapel, Pasco County, US 19 corridor. As soon as they shut down and they do a big raid in Tampa and the police brag about how they shut down their thing, whatever, give it a couple months and they're back at it again. Tampa's problem with ladies of the night is pretty serious and is more sinister than what people would imagine. I've interviewed several victims of trafficking for our YouTube channel. One particular person told me that many websites are used clandestinely, and many people that end up in these vulnerable situations think that they're doing like online dating type stuff, but they don't really realize what they're getting into. Not only are they looking for people to buy, sometimes they're looking for people to hurt. And it's a very bad situation in Tampa, and an embarrassing one at that. A city like Tampa, where many people travel to on vacation to, shouldn't really have this problem. When you have a metropolitan area that has counties like Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando that have extraordinarily high overdose death rates, Bradenton as well, areas of large consumption with a lot of vulnerable people, very few opportunities, and many establishments that are shady, it kind of creates the perfect storm of situations for people who are vulnerable to end up in this predicament. You may not even know how close you are to these things that are happening in your community. Perhaps the neighbors across the street have an Airbnb or a vacation rental and they rent it out. Perhaps somebody maybe will rent this house out for a night or two at most and use it for this purpose. Perhaps you're an Uber driver and you're taking a passenger from one place to the next, not aware that this passenger is stuck in a very, very complicated situation. You may not be aware because it's a very covert operation, but it's everywhere around you. If you're an Uber driver, they could be your passenger, and if you live in a house, it could be the person next door renting out the property for a night on a website, and you may not even be aware that these things are unfolding right next door. They figured out how to move to where they're undetectable, and they no longer just use fixed hotels or places that law enforcement is watching. They can rent vehicles, they can rent properties, and they can move in ways that are undetectable. And that makes these networks almost unstoppable in the situations that people are in. Most of us will never even imagine. This is a huge problem in the Tampa Bay area, and the city of Tampa is the headquarters for this nightmare. Many of these females are homeless. They have diseases. They have staph infections. They have very bad hygiene after all. They're sleeping on the streets or outside of homeless shelters, in and out of prison. What do you think you're getting here? Number 9 is DUIs in Cape Coral. Very similar to the situation in Sarasota. Cape Coral is a vast and expansive suburb, and all the bars in the center of town. At the end of the night, these people that are retired decide to get behind the wheel and drive home, causing a lot of havoc on the streets of Cape Coral. Just last night, somebody was arrested in Cape Coral for a DUI. The police department of Cape Coral arrested her with 2 charges, 1 DUI and 2 causing property damage while under the influence. Now, the difference between Cape Coral and Sarasota's DUI problem is that in Sarasota, they're being proactive about stopping the problem. But in Cape Coral, the demographic that does DUIs is a little bit older, and as you guys know, in Florida, they play nepotism and favorites, and they can't just go arresting old white people in Florida. The Cape Coral Police Department likes to turn a blind eye to its DUI problem. After all, there aren't that many pedestrians in Cape Coral because the residential areas are far from the commercial areas. You don't have people walking around like you do in Sarasota, where it's more of a mixed landscape, and that leads to more people being hurt during DUI incidents. So since the only thing that's being hurt out here is property, the Cape Coral Police Department knows that there's a lot of DUIs. Many times people call in DUIs, and notice that Cape Coral Police doesn't really seem to care too much about preventing this problem. After all, it's pretty simple. There aren't too many pedestrians. There's only property to be damaged. And the Cape Coral Police Department isn't going to start going after rich old white people and arresting poor white women that are drinking and driving. They turn a blind eye to the situation, but I will tell you, it can be very dangerous to drive in Cape Coral late at night. And don't think law enforcement is proactive about fixing the problem like they are in Sarasota. Now, I've personally seen situations where law enforcement will detain somebody who's clearly engaging in a DUI, and law enforcement will just let them go, have them call a family member to give them a ride. They're just reluctant. Like, see how they kind of told me to leave? They're reluctant to make these DUI arrests unless they absolutely have to. They'll diminish the seriousness of the situation, just have people call a tow truck or have somebody pick them up or tell them to park the vehicle. In most situations, when law enforcement runs into somebody committing a DUI, it's a serious offense and the person gets arrested. But in Cape Coral, it's so prevalent, and law enforcement here wants to keep their analytics pretty because they're competing for that many times law enforcement here will just turn a blind eye, pretend it's not happening. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen the Cape Coral Police Department do this, where they got somebody that is clearly engaging a DUI, and they just kind of try to find another solution other than arresting the person. Keep in mind that most people don't have a criminal record. It's a white lady, Sandy, that works down there at the furniture store, so they can't just go and arrest her for a DUI. They have to kind of let her go. So again, it's not the type of demographic that they want to put behind bars, so they always work with them to find a solution. And if you don't believe in me and how prevalent DUIs are in Cape Coral, you may remember that a while back we were doing a live stream in Cape Coral, and what do you think we saw? I'm not going to even say it. Like, maybe we'll go because I'm crazy. JJ, shout out from the DMV. There we go. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. Look at that. He crashed. Welcome to Southwest Florida, y'all. I'm live. Are you kidding me? Look at, he got him. Look at that. Oh, snap. How do you do a, oh, crap. Save a highlight. too. It's just so yeah, without a doubt, even on our live streams, we've caught people doing crazy things on the road. Driving through Cape Coral at night is dangerous, so if you're out there, be careful. The police is not proactive because the demographic that's doing it isn't one they want to arrest. So what a mess. At least the Sarasota Police Department is trying to damper the situation, but in Cape Coral, like I said, it's not the demographic that they want to lock up. And overall, just like some of these other cities, Cape Coral is very safe, very clean, very beautiful, lots of great restaurants, great waterways, mostly new home construction. It's a great city, but late at night driving on those roads, you need to be extraordinarily careful. Number 10 is road rage in the Villages. Now, the Villages is one of those communities that is labeled as one of the best places to move in Florida. But anybody who spends a little bit of time here finds out instantly that these are some of the angriest people on earth. Just 3 weeks ago, they arrested a guy for a road rage shooting. Now, there's been charges of people using golf carts as weapons, people crashing and DUIing in golf carts. Recently, there was also one where like somebody in a golf cart like attacked somebody else in a golf cart. You're talking guns getting pulled, guns getting shot. It's just another day in the Villages. Now, the Villages sits in Sumter County, and Sumter County recently had a homicide rate of 11 per 100,000, higher than Miami-Dade. And many of those homicide incidents are road rage or just anger fit related. There's a lot of very angry people in the Villages. The roads here include, of course, regular roads, but they also have roads for golf carts. And the ones for golf carts, you're going to run into a lot of really angry people. Individuals who are just out there having a really bad day. Particularly if you're a young person like me, they hate young people. So if you're a young person, they really don't want to see you out there. I think just about every single video I've ever done in Sumter County and in the Villages, I've had to deal with road rage or angry people in some sort or another. For some reason, they just don't want young people here. So if you're young, people like look for a reason to bump heads with you. It's a very kind of weird place, but road rage incidents in Sumter County are a huge problem. You're always going to run into people looking for trouble out here. They're angry, they're mad. A lot of times they're under the influence, and they're, of course, armed. Sumter County also has a fairly high overdose death rate, so let's go through the analytics. You have a homicide rate higher than Miami-Dade. You have one of the highest overdose death rates in Florida. You have constantly road rage shootings. You have all these crimes happening, but they want to paint it as one of the greatest places to live in Florida. Obviously, road rage is a huge problem here. If you've watched my videos in this area, you know what I'm talking about. You practically can't spend a day in this city without being road raged by somebody. There's just really nasty people. And road rage many times is accompanied by gun violence. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in. I think the Villages is like 98% white last time I checked. I think now it's like 90% white. A lot of Hispanics have moved up there to help with hospitality industry. You know, it's a lot of elderly people, so they need workers. And a lot of people from Miami and South Florida have moved up here. So I think the demographics have shifted a little bit. But nonetheless, they're horrible analytics, high homicide rates, high overdose rates, and very angry people. Anytime you have weapons and substances in the same place at these levels, you're going to end up with some fairly angry people. Just 3 weeks ago, a guy in a rented BMW was at the Magnolia Plaza in the Villages where he rammed a Jeep with his vehicle and then eventually ended up firing a weapon in a road rage incident. A 66-year-old white male was charged with leaving the scene of a crash and discharging a firearm in public. Now, this incident happened in Wildwood, which is a little community right outside of the Villages. The victim was, of course, a young person, a 38-year-old woman who was in a Jeep, noticed that this guy started to ram her vehicle with his in public. So imagine this, you're a 38-year-old woman in the Villages, And this 66-year-old white man decides to start ramming your vehicle in traffic, eventually leading to him pulling out a firearm and discharging it in public. This is the type of situation that is like normal in the villages. And then he left the scene because, of course, there's no accountability when you're a 66-year-old white man in the villages. You can just ram a rented vehicle into somebody, shoot off a couple rounds, and leave like nothing happened. Just a normal day in the villages. So the young lady in the Jeep decided to follow the BMW to get the license plate number to make the report for him ramming the vehicle, and that's when he decided to run up and fire the weapon. Now, I'm going to give you some word of advice. If you ever run into somebody who's road raging you, the last thing you want to do is try to follow the person you don't want to interact with the person, okay? So just word of advice. Your insurance can handle car damages later, but getting into a altercation or following somebody who's ramming a vehicle into you eventually leads to that person trying to shoot you. So it's just word of advice and words of experience from somebody who's lived in Florida, a state that has road rage left and right. Don't ever engage these people. So this young lady, by following this person to get their license plate number, pretty much incited to the person who was already ramming a vehicle into her, now going ahead and deciding to shoot a firearm at her. Okay, so also 3 weeks ago on Highway 44, the road we're on right now, there was heavy traffic, and a dispute arose in heavy traffic where two Hispanic males got out of a vehicle in heavy traffic and decided to open the door of another vehicle and attack the person. Another road rage incident in this area. So it seems like it's just, like an everyday thing for road rage and violence in the villages. So that's why it's on today's list. This particular intersection of the villages is known for having very heavy traffic, and that's probably what led to the frustration. Of course, both of these Hispanic males were arrested for attacking somebody in a road rage incident. So if you ever find yourself in Sumter County, Florida, don't let these country roads fool you. There are some very angry and dangerous people here. The overdose death rate here is 6 times higher than Miami, and the homicide rate is higher than Miami, which is crazy because Miami is a large metropolitan area. The crime analytics don't lie. A lot of people just assume because it's a predominantly white, middle class to wealthy community of people in retirement, this is supposed to be some safe place, but the crime analytics here are impressively higher than many large cities. Summerfield's a little rural community up there by the villages in Marion County next door, and a woman was having a little DUI. She was from Michigan. She decided to attack people in traffic and yell at people that got scared. She was arrested for DUI and road rage. Now, this area's overdose death rate is like 6 times higher than Miami, and it's one of the highest in Florida. I believe that one of the prime reasons why the villages has so much road rage and anger and violence is because it has an aging population. A lot of times these people are prescribed medications. They combine that with drinking. Many times they assume because they're in a golf cart that they can drink and drive, and it's not a problem like when you do it in a vehicle. That's a wrong assumption. And of course, again, just like Cape Coral, the villages, law enforcement kind of likes to look the other way because their preferred demographic can't just get arrested, so they kind of let it slide. And you got people that are drinking, they're driving golf carts drunk, and then they're mixing it with all the pills they're getting. You have an elderly population, so in Florida they're flooding them with pills. So pills, alcohol, golf carts, anger, road rage, the perfect combination. The villages definitely has a huge crime problem, and despite what the fact you've heard it's one of the greatest places in Florida, it's the type of place I certainly wouldn't want to live. The people here are very angry. Then back in September, there's William. Now, he attacked his 91-year-old neighbor. Now, he wasn't sent to jail or prison because, again, the white demographic is preferred. He was sent to an anger management program because of a road rage incident he had where he attacked, again, a 91-year-old neighbor. Now, I'm going to recount all these recent road rage incidents because There's going to be people in the villages who are going to call me a liar and say that this isn't true and this doesn't happen, and they're a great, friendly community. That's why I'm going to recount all these recent road rage incidents in case somebody has a reply that they can remember that I'm not making this up, that there are countless, innumerable road rage incidents. In fact, I think I'm just going to have to do a whole video just on road rage in the villages. But the point being, it's a very angry place, and road rage is very common here. And again, I recounted all of these incidents in case somebody lives in the villages and wants to disagree with me. But you don't have to leave them. You can just Google it yourself. It's a huge problem in the villages. I know they're going to get offended at what I'm saying. That's why I had to list all these different recent events, just to remind them that it's not my opinion, it's the facts. All right, everybody. So those are 10 places in Florida that are facing a considerable crime problem. I think instead of focusing on just every random type of crime, by narrowing it down to specific crimes, we can better identify areas where places in Florida could improve. I think this is a much better way to kind of understand crime in Florida, because even if you move to a safe city like Cape Coral, the Villages, or Hialeah, you're going to find that there are some issues in every one of these quote-unquote safe cities that need to be addressed. Most of the time when people think about violent crimes and issues, when places to avoid moving to, they may just overlook suburbs and rural communities and think that these problems only happen in the inner city. But as we've seen on today's video, even great places like Sarasota and Cape Coral have room for improvement. And just because you move to a great city in Florida doesn't mean that you're not going to face some serious crime concerns of one shape or another. There's police departments like the one in Sarasota doing the best they can to make their communities a safer place. But unfortunately, in the case of many of the problems that we're facing here in Florida, Cape Coral, the villages, many times law enforcement just likes to look the other way because it's their preferred demographic that's contributing to the crime. In other cases like Bradenton, race doesn't make a difference. Law enforcement is set on trying to make the lives of homeless people impossible, providing very little resources but demanding that they keep it moving. These are just some of the problems that we're facing here in Florida. Great cities, but with serious room for improvement. Those are the top 10 incidental crimes that cities in Florida are known for in the year 2025. I know this has been a very long video, but I wanted to make an in-depth coverage on this topic.